There's a reason your life has never felt like everyone else's. There's a reason you've always sensed something deeper pulling you, guiding you, setting you apart, even when it hurt, even when it made no sense. You were picked, not randomly, not accidentally, but intentionally. And while the world may never understand the full depth of what you carry, deep inside, you've always known that you were called to walk a path most can't even see. This is why the storms have been heavier. This is why the detours were more frequent. This is why your breakthroughs didn't come easy. Because the higher the calling, the deeper the carving. You weren't just chosen, you were prepared. Before we go further, watch this message until the very end. Not for entertainment, but for alignment. Something in your spirit already knows this isn't just a video, it's a confirmation. And if these words speak to you, let the energy flow forward. Write your warmest wishes in the comments and type 144 as a symbol of divine motion. Let the universe feel your intention, your readiness, your light. Because wishes are real, and energy moves with focus. Let's activate it together. This is why you were picked. Because when others give up, you go deeper. Because when others copy, you create. Because your soul came here not just to survive, but to shift things. You were never made to follow. You were made to lead silently, powerfully, energetically. You see things others overlook. You sense truths others ignore. Your sensitivity is not a weakness. It's your divine weapon. It lets you navigate people, spaces, energy, emotion, all without words. That level of spiritual depth? It's why life couldn't treat you casually. Now, chosen one, show your light by liking this video and subscribe to the channel, and let's step into this together. You were picked because your pain had purpose. The betrayals, the losses, the moments you were brought to your knees, none of it was in vain. It forged something inside of you that comfort never could. You became clear. You became discerning. You became ready. The fire wasn't meant to consume you, it was meant to reveal you. And that version of you that rose from it, that's the one the world is not prepared for, but desperately needs. The reason you were picked is because you didn't just break, you broke through. You didn't just fall, you rose differently. Life didn't just test you, it entrusted you. With insight, with influence, with invisible strength. That strength doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes it comes in silence, in solitude, in situations where you had no choice but to grow. But now that strength is your compass. You move with a knowing, a presence, a depth, because everything you went through made you. And here's the thing, not everyone can carry what you carry. That's why the path was so lonely. That's why people fell away. That's why you never quite fit in. You were picked because your presence is meant to shift atmospheres, not join the noise, transform it. You don't speak just to be heard. You speak to wake people up. You don't show up to take space. You show up to move energy. That level of spiritual power doesn't come without cost, but it also doesn't come without impact. You were picked because your spirit doesn't bend easily. Even when life tried to crush you, something in you refused to stay down. That refusal? That's divine. It's ancient. It's encoded in you. You don't need external validation. Your journey has already proven your worth. You're no longer seeking permission. You're walking in purpose. Chosen ones aren't just called to light. They're called to walk through darkness so others can follow their flame. That's what you've been doing. Every trial, training, every delay, direction, every tear, a seed. And those seeds, they're blooming now, quietly, powerfully. And the more you bloom, the less you need to announce it. Because your life has become the evidence. Your energy has become the message. There were moments where you questioned everything, moments where you begged for clarity, moments where you almost gave up. But you didn't. And that decision, the one you made silently in your own storm, is the reason doors are opening now. Not because you forced them, but because you aligned with them. And when you align with what's real, what's meant for you cannot miss you. Chosen one, you were picked to be a vessel, a transmitter, a quiet force. You don't always get the credit, but you always shift the room. You don't always get acknowledged, but you always leave a mark. Because your assignment isn't to be seen, it's to be felt. And that's exactly what happens when you move. People feel you. Your words, your silence, your choices, your presence. And that's not something you learn. That's something you are. You didn't come here to play small. You came here to wake up timelines, to activate paths, to walk with so much truth that people start questioning their own illusions. That's why you've been through so much, because someone who carries that kind of light has to be tested. And you passed the test, not by being perfect, but by being real, raw, open, unbreakable. The world isn't ready for you, but that's never stopped you before. Because the chosen don't wait to be accepted. They walk in truth anyway. And that truth, it's making space for everything you were promised. Every word that was whispered to your soul, every vision that kept you going when nothing around you made sense. It's here, not in the distance, in motion. You were picked, not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. And you're ready. You weren't picked for perfection. You were picked for your willingness to grow. You were chosen not because you had all the answers, but because you had the courage to keep asking questions when everything around you fell apart. That kind of resilience can't be taught. It's forged. In pressure, in silence, in spaces where no one clapped, and no one understood what you were building within. There were seasons where nothing made sense, where everything was stripped, where you were left standing alone in the ruins of what you thought your life would be. But even then, even in the confusion, the heartbreak, the isolation, you kept going. Not because you had a plan, but because something deep inside wouldn't let you quit. That's the reason you were picked. Because you had a fire that no storm could kill. And let's be real, the picking didn't always feel like a gift. At times, it felt like punishment. Watching others live easy lives while you wrestled with shadows. Seeing people praised for half the work while you labored in silence. Being misunderstood, left out, misread. But what you didn't know then is that all of it was making you undeniable. It was making you unshakable. And now, you've become the person who doesn't just survive storms, you walk through them. You're not here to be flashy. You're here to be felt. People might not always know how to label you, but they feel the shift when you enter the room. They feel the truth in your voice. They feel the peace in your presence. That's the effect of someone who's been picked and prepared. You don't have to say much. Your energy speaks louder than words ever could. And what they'll never know is how much you've endured to carry this kind of presence. How many nights you cried alone. How many times you questioned your own worth. How many days you walked through with your soul bleeding and your head high. They don't know the cost. But that's okay. Because you didn't rise to be understood. You rose because you couldn't stay where you were. You were picked for more than just survival. You were picked to shift patterns, to break generational cycles, to rise from pain and turn it into power. You were chosen not just for yourself, but for the lives that will be changed by your presence, your decisions, your example. Because, make no mistake, someone is watching. And when they see you keep going, they'll remember that they can too. You're not where you are by accident. That quiet voice guiding you, that intuitive knowing that wouldn't leave you alone, that was the call. That was the pull. And now you're living in the answer to a prayer you didn't even know you were speaking. Everything in your life, the breakdowns, the endings, the losses, was preparing you for this moment. This alignment, this clarity, this strength. And no, the path hasn't been easy, but it's been right. Because every time life knocked you down, you came back different, sharper, clearer, more tuned in. You learned how to protect your peace. You learned how to walk away from what doesn't nourish you. You learned how to say no with no guilt, and how to say yes to yourself, even if no one else understands. That's the work of the chosen, not to please everyone, but to stay true to your assignment. And your assignment isn't always about noise or spotlight. Sometimes your greatest impact comes from the quiet changes you make, the boundaries you set, the healing you choose, the love you give, the truth you stand in. You're no longer triggered by things that used to shake you, because now you understand your reaction is your responsibility. You've mastered the art of responding, not reacting. You've stopped explaining yourself to people who don't even hear themselves. That evolution? That's why you were picked. You've been entrusted with emotional intelligence, spiritual depth, energetic vision, and now you use it to build, not to beg. And even when it gets quiet again, even when the tests come back around, you won't fold, because now you know who you are. You know what it took to get here. You know what you've overcome. You've built a core so strong that no external storm can shake your internal foundation. That's what being picked is really about, not avoiding the storm, but becoming the kind of soul who outlasts it. So don't shrink. Don't second-guess. Don't dim your light to fit into spaces you've already outgrown. You were picked to go further, to dig deeper, to rise higher. Not because you're better, but because you're ready. And now? Now it's time to live in that readiness, to stop looking back, to stop wondering why they didn't believe in you, why they left, why they couldn't see you. They weren't supposed to. Their absence was part of the alignment. You're not missing anything. You're gaining everything. This is the season where your spirit no longer tolerates anything less than truth, where your intuition leads and your boundaries protect, where your peace becomes non-negotiable. You don't explain that. You embody it. And in doing so, you become everything you were always meant to be. You were picked, and now you know why. You were picked because you're not afraid to go where others won't. You're willing to walk into the depths of your own soul, confront your shadows, and rise with self-awareness most people spend a lifetime avoiding. You didn't just get through pain, you transmuted it. That means you didn't let pain stay pain. You turned it into purpose, into power, into presence. That's rare. That's sacred. At first, you thought you were being punished. You questioned why things had to fall apart, why people kept leaving, why your heart had to be so soft in a world that rewards hardness. But now you understand. The picking wasn't about comfort, it was about capacity. The more you were broken open, the more you could hold. Hold light, hold love, hold wisdom, hold truth. This is why you don't operate like everyone else. You don't chase what's popular. You're led by what's real. You're not swayed by trends. You're rooted in truth. And that truth makes you magnetic. Not because you're trying to be, but because aligned souls feel when someone has walked through the fire and still came out glowing. You've stopped needing to explain your boundaries. You no longer feel guilt for saying no. You don't overstay in spaces that exhaust your spirit. Why? Because you've finally understood your energy is sacred. You know what it costs to abandon yourself, and you refuse to pay that price again. That's not arrogance, that's wisdom. And wisdom is exactly what the journey gave you. See, when you were picked, you were also marked. Marked for more. Marked for depth. Marked for legacy. That means your life would never be average, even if it looked like struggle on the surface. Because underneath the struggle, there was a divine setup. Every loss stripped away illusion. Every delay refined your timing. Every rejection redirected you back to yourself. Now, you're not desperate for attention. You're grounded in intention. You don't need loud rooms to feel seen. You don't need big crowds to feel powerful. Because you are power. Quiet, rooted, electric power. The kind that doesn't speak often, but when it does, it shifts the whole room. The kind that doesn't seek permission because it walks with purpose. You were picked because you're a vessel for something ancient, something sacred, something bigger than your past, your pain, or your personality. This is about destiny now, alignment, legacy. Your life isn't just yours. It's connected to timelines, bloodlines, and people you've never even met. That's why the fire was hotter for you, because the flame you carry lights the way for others. And yes, you still have human moments, moments of doubt, tiredness, isolation. But you don't unpack there anymore. You don't let temporary feelings cancel eternal truths. You rest when needed, but you don't quit. You retreat to realign, not to disappear. That's emotional mastery. That's spiritual discipline. And it came from the choosing. You no more look at your sensitivity as a flaw. Now, you see it as your divine compass. You feel when something is off, and you trust it. You feel when something is right, and you lean into it. That's intuition. That's being in alignment with your higher self. You don't need 1,000 opinions when you have that kind of inner clarity. You're not even angry anymore. You're just free. Free from trying to fit in. Free from trying to be enough. Free from proving your worth. Because you realize now, you were always enough. You were always worthy. You were just around people who couldn't see clearly. And that's okay, because now you see yourself. You've walked through every season of becoming. The loss, the letting go, the stillness, the silence. And now you walk with presence, with peace, with quiet certainty. Not the kind that needs to be loud, but the kind that knows. You were built for this. You no longer fear being alone, because you've found wholeness within. You've become your own home, your own sanctuary, your own validation. That's the ultimate shift. You used to search for completion outside of yourself. Now you know no one can complete what was already divinely whole. You've become the evidence of what healing looks like, of what alignment feels like. You embody what others are still searching for, not because you're better, but because you answered a call they're still ignoring. That's the price of being picked. But it's also the privilege. You were picked to show what's possible when someone fully returns to their truth, and you don't have to force anyone to see it. You just are. Your life speaks now. Your presence teaches. Your journey inspires, even if they never tell you. Don't underestimate the silent impact of living in alignment. Some of your greatest influence will come from people who never clap. But never forget how you made them feel. This is your reminder. You don't need to do more to be worthy. You don't need to push harder to prove yourself. You've already done the work. The shift has already happened. Now it's about receiving, walking in what's already yours. Showing up with the energy of someone who knows who they are, what they carry, and why they were picked. You're not behind. You're not late. You're right on time. And the time is now. As the path continues, something subtle but powerful shifts. You no longer just survive life. You start shaping it. You no longer react to what happens. You respond with wisdom. This is the result of being picked and prepared. There's an inner stillness now, a knowing that doesn't rely on external proof. You no longer chase clarity. You are clarity. You no longer beg to be seen. You see yourself. The chosen one is not loud because they need to be. They're quiet because they don't have to be. The energy speaks. The way you walk into a room, grounded. The way you move through conflict, calm. The way you hold space for others, yet no longer abandon yourself. That's what happens when you've done the internal work. You stop leaking energy. You stop trying to fix what isn't yours. You carry peace like armor, not because you're unaffected, but because you're aligned. You were picked not just to lead, but to become. And becoming meant shedding everything that wasn't truly you. The people-pleasing, the fear, the need to belong. You had to walk away from old versions of yourself, even when it was painful, because you couldn't carry your future while clinging to your past. The chosen path is not a straight line. It's a spiral. Each loop bringing you deeper into who you really are, and now you've reached a level where your life itself teaches. You don't need to convince anyone of your transformation. They feel it, in the boundaries you set, in the conversations you no longer entertain, in the peace you protect at all costs. That's real growth, not the one that screams, but the one that radiates. You've stopped over-explaining. You've stopped apologizing for being different. You've stopped shrinking your truth to make others comfortable. Why? Because you finally understand. Comfort is not the goal. Freedom is. And sometimes, freedom means standing alone. Sometimes, it means walking away. Sometimes, it means choosing yourself, even if it disappoints others. But that's the maturity of the chosen. You've learned to hold space for your humanity and your divinity at the same time. You no longer pretend to be above the pain. You just don't drown in it anymore. You let it pass. You let it teach. You let it go. Because holding on to pain doesn't make you more powerful. Healing from it does. You've become a mirror. Your light exposes what others haven't faced. Some will admire you. Some will resent you. That's not your concern. Your job isn't to be liked. It's to be real, to embody truth, even when it's inconvenient, to move in love, even when it's not returned, to stay grounded, even when life tries to shake you. This is why your silence is powerful, why your absence is noticed, why your energy lingers long after you leave. You're not just a person, you're a presence. That's the effect of alignment, of walking with your higher self fully activated. You don't need to force anything. You don't chase, you attract. You don't perform, you exist. You've also learned to listen, not just with your ears, but with your spirit. You catch shifts in energy before they're spoken. You feel dishonesty, even when the words sound right. You don't argue with what you know. That's not arrogance, that's your gift. You were picked because your intuition was meant to guide you, and now you're learning to trust it fully. People won't always understand why you distance yourself, why you say no more often, why you guard your space like sacred ground. But you do, because you've lived in chaos. You've known what it's like to be around loud souls who only speak from ego, never from spirit. And now that you have found peace, you protect it like your life depends on it, because it does. There's a wisdom in you now that can't be faked, a rhythm to your choices that didn't come from a book. It came from the fire. You've learned how to sit with yourself, how to not run from your triggers, how to not project your pain. That's rare. That's divine. That's what being picked requires. And through it all, you never lost your light. It may have dimmed. It may have flickered. But you never let the darkness win. That resilience, that endurance, that faith. It's what separates the chosen from the called. Many hear the voice. Few respond. Fewer still remain when the path gets hard. But you stayed. And because you stayed, the path is opening now. Doors that were once closed are beginning to move. Not because you chased them, but because you became the version of yourself that could hold what's behind them. And you're not rushing. You're not forcing. You're simply allowing. That's divine timing. That's divine flow. And that's what happens when you trust your selection more than your surroundings. This is your life now, walking in alignment, even when it's quiet. Listening to your intuition, even when others disagree. Choosing peace, even when chaos begs for your reaction. You didn't come here to fight every battle. You came here to build something sacred. And you're doing just that. With every step, every boundary, every breath, you were picked, not to impress, not to conform, but to transform. And that transformation, it's happening right now. You were picked because your journey isn't just about you, it's about what you activate in others. The light you carry isn't just meant to warm your own path. It's meant to illuminate the way for those still trying to find theirs. And sometimes, the most powerful shifts happen not when you speak, but when you simply are. You weren't chosen to be louder. You were chosen to be clearer. You were never meant to convince people. You were meant to become someone that made them question everything they thought was true. Not through ego, but through embodiment. You didn't preach healing, you lived it. You didn't demand respect, your energy commanded it. You didn't beg to be seen. Your growth made it impossible to ignore. And yet, it's never been about recognition. You've long outgrown the need to be noticed. Your soul is no longer desperate for validation. It's aligned with vibration. You understand that everything you attract now is a match to the frequency you choose. Not what you say you want, but what you're truly ready for. Because chosen ones don't just manifest from desire. They manifest from identity, and you've finally remembered who you are. There was a time when you questioned that identity, when you doubted the vision, when you bent yourself trying to make others comfortable. But all that did was disconnect you from your own truth. You can't shrink your way into alignment. You can't compromise your energy and still feel whole. You learned that the hard way. But now that you've learned it, you'll never forget it. This is what being picked requires. Integrity when no one is looking. Consistency when no one applauds. Trust when there's no clarity. And most of all, love. Love for yourself. Love for your process. Love for the truth, even when it's heavy. You've been trained for this, not through theory, through life, through fire. Through silence, you've stopped looking for shortcuts. You don't want quick wins. You want lasting roots. Because you know that what's real takes time. And the life you're building isn't made to impress. It's made to sustain. You've seen what happens when people rush success. It collapses under pressure. But you took the long way, the quiet way, the deep way, and now your foundation is unshakable. You were picked because your spirit can hold what your mind couldn't yet understand. You didn't always know why you had to go through certain things, but your soul said yes anyway. That obedience, that surrender, that's rare. That's divine. And now it's paying off in peace, in clarity, in inner strength. You no longer fear the unknown because you've walked with it. You made friends with the dark. You learned how to breathe even in the middle of chaos. And now you're not just surviving. You're guiding quietly, gently, powerfully. Some people are watching you and realigning their lives just because they see the strength in your stillness. They're observing how you move, how you handle pressure, how you respond with love, and it's planting seeds in their spirit. And the best part? They don't even know it's happening. That's how spiritual leadership works. It's not a title, it's a presence. You don't have to declare anything. You don't need a crown. You are the message, the healing, the blueprint. You walk into rooms and shift the atmosphere without trying. That's why you were picked, because you can be trusted with that kind of quiet influence. But with that influence comes responsibility, and you feel that deeply. That's why you move with intention. That's why you're careful with your words, your time, your energy. You're not careless anymore. You're not reactionary. You've grown into someone who thinks long-term, who moves for legacy, not for likes, who understands that your alignment impacts not just you, but everyone connected to you. This is the invisible weight of being chosen, carrying a frequency that awakens others, even when you're exhausted. Standing in truth when lies would be easier. Loving with an open heart, even when yours has been bruised. That's not weakness, that's spiritual mastery. And maybe they'll never say it out loud. But you've changed lives just by continuing to rise, by refusing to shrink, by choosing evolution over comfort. Some people are breathing lighter because you refused to give up. And even if they never tell you, your presence shifted something in them. But the most powerful shift? The one within you. You've become the version of yourself that once felt like a dream. Not because everything is perfect, but because now you feel whole. You trust yourself. You know your boundaries. You respect your energy. You forgive faster. You walk away sooner. You pour into yourself fully. That's the reward. Not the stuff, not the applause. You were picked for this level of embodiment, this peace, this alignment. And now that you've stepped into it, nothing and no one can take it from you. The picking was never random. It was written. There comes a moment on the journey when you stop asking, "Why me?" and you start saying, "Of course me." Because now you see it clearly. The patterns, the preparation, the pauses. None of it was random. Every detour, every heartbreak, every delay, it all carried one message. You were being made for more. You were picked because the world needed someone like you. Not someone louder, not someone perfect, but someone real. Someone who could rise again and again and still lead with love. Someone who could break cycles just by choosing peace. Someone whose light couldn't be dimmed because it didn't come from the outside. It was built in the dark. You no longer walk with doubt. You walk with knowing. You don't fear the path ahead because you are the path. Your story is proof. Your presence is prophecy. And your alignment, that's your protection now. So here you are, still rising, still glowing, still chosen. This is why you were picked. And this is just the beginning.